The head of Detective Comics admits that manga are superior to American comics. We need to talk about this. So, some of you who listen to the podcast version have already heard a version of this video, except the sound was terrible, so I decided to redo it for YouTube. That's how it is, I'm redoing it, and that's it. It's not a big deal, but you can still watch it. Since I work on the fly, there will probably be some new punchlines. Let's take a look together at what Jim Lee said then. So who is Jim Lee? Jim Lee is the current president of Detective Comics, but above all, he's a legendary comic book artist. The X-Men in the 90s, the prime of the X-Men, that's him. The prime of Superman, that's him. The prime of Batman, that's him. He's the legend of Detective Comics. He worked at Marvel, of course, but he was also the guy behind, if I remember correctly, he was one of the masterminds behind Image Comics at the time. If I'm not mistaken, I think it was him, Rob Liefeld, Todd McFarlane, I think, if I'm not mistaken, and some other guys. I forgot their names, but I think he was in it, Jim Lee, if I'm not mistaken. Anyway, he's a big legend. In terms of manga equivalence, you could put him at the same table as Urasawa in terms of name because he was mainly an artist. We're going to talk more about the guys, the artists. I think in terms of important artists on the drawing side of comics, you can put him next to a Murata, you can put him next to an Inoue, a Toriyama, obviously. He's that kind of big gun in the comics world, so he's not just anybody. Let's see what he's going to say in this article. Here we go. Let's go. So I just picked a random article. It's from Les News. There you go. Jim Lee highlights the strengths of manga compared to American comics. It's him, Jim Lee, as you can see. Jim Lee, President and Chief Creative Officer of Detective Comics, recently highlighted the significant advantage that Japanese manga has over Western comics. He believes manga's diverse stories and cultural influence are key to its global success. What does that mean? We'll see later. In an interview with Nikki X Run, Lee noted that the lasting popularity of manga and anime lies in their ability to resonate with a broader audience. Compared to American comics, which remain mostly focused on superhero stories, he pointed out that the dominance of superheroes in the American market limits the creative and commercial reach of its works. Indeed, the majority of comic book sales in the United States are concentrated on this single genre, while manga in Japan covers a wide range of different themes. That's right, manga can talk about anything. It's not just about superheroes or fighting. You can make manga about sports, cooking, pottery, and who knows what else. Lee contrasted this situation with that of Japan, where manga is considered mainstream literature. It covers genres as diverse as sports, cooking, everyday life, as well as fantasy and action. This variety of genres allows manga to appeal to readers of different age groups and interests. Regarding the narrative style of manga, Lee described it as incredibly powerful, and he expressed questions about the potential shortcomings of Western comics. He emphasized that manga's advantage is not just its visual style, but also its narrative sensibility and unique cultural approach. The manga market is larger than our industry, said Lee, adding that American publishers should see this success as a learning opportunity rather than direct competition. Yes, anyway, when it comes to competition, you've already lost. I'm not sure he truly believes that. If roles were reversed, we wouldn't hear this talk. Understanding why some stories succeed in Japan while others fail in the West could help inform future creative strategies for American comics. Lee also expressed his optimism about the global growth of manga, stating that its successes serve as a benchmark he aspires to for the Western comics industry. His comments come as anime and manga grow in global popularity. Recent releases like Demon Slayer, Infinity Cash, The Chainsaw Man, the movie, and Rise of the Ark have seen record sales in the United States. Well, those are movies, so I don't see the connection with manga sales, but anyway. Boom! Well, that's interesting. So I want to say that's good, right? Jim Lee is making a perfectly clear observation about, the decline of United States comics. But you should know, since it's not the main topic here, you might not be that interested. Still, United States comics have been overshadowed by manga for about 10 years. Really, to an unbelievable extent, My Hero Academia, Demon Slayer, Chainsaw Man, all of that One Piece, they're insanely successful in the United States too, and that's not for nothing. It's partly thanks to the rise of the manga and Japanese animation market in the United States that manga is becoming a global phenomenon, that's it. We're used to manga and anime since they've been here for 40 years, but in the United States they're more recent, and that's when it really began. Previously they had anime, but manga has become popular there over the past decade. That's why every year now we see more and more collaborations, like One Piece with the NBA, for example. We also saw during Seth Living's parade at Times Square, there were huge One Piece balloons, huge Dragon Ball balloons. Awesome, there you go. So it's really starting to replace pop culture a bit, or at least to become well established in pop culture, even in America, and I think that's pretty cool. Why? Because honestly, the hegemonic side of American soft power was starting to annoy everyone a bit. At least it was starting to annoy me. There you go. American television shows are generally great, though there are some bad ones. It's refreshing to check out shows from another hemisphere sometimes. Let's say, yeah, that's really what I meant. But it's not just Japan, by the way, it's more about Asian soft power. In general, when I talk about soft power, I'm really talking about pop culture stuff, you know, the success of Squid Game, K-dramas that are blowing up everywhere. I don't watch them since I'm not a chick, but they're catching on everywhere. Anime and manga are especially starting to take off and make their mark. We have another model of pop culture that's starting to make its mark. It's refreshing and enjoyable. As an anime and manga fan, it's nice to see it becoming more dominant. I think that's cool. There you go, and I really hope that manga and anime will continue to, how should I say, become more popular while still staying true to what they are. That is, don't start. Come on, we're going to get back to that problem, right? Don't start trying to put on an American front. To begin segmenting the audience even more, trying to please an audience that doesn't even exist. That's because it's also one of the problems with American comics. We'll talk about the other big problem with American comics later. And here, Jim Lee said it very well. It's mostly superhero stories. Now, that's not all there is in American comics. But that's 80% of the game. 80% of the game. It's yet another iteration of Batman, Superman, Spider-Man, the X-Men, the Fantastic Four, Iron Man, and whatever you want, it's superheroes. Even in indie comics, it's a lot of superheroes. That's just their culture. In Japan, people often claim it's only shonen, but that's not accurate. Actually, in Japan, there have always been a lot of different things, but it's like Japan is focused, it's really focused. If it focused only on mechas, it would be much harder to appeal to everyone. Well, in the United States, it's mostly about superheroes. Of course, there are other things, obviously, but that's what remains. The core of it is being about superheroes, whether independent or not, so that's a problem. If you want to read something other than superhero stories, there's not much to sink your teeth into. Of course, there are counterexamples. The Walking Dead, a huge indie success, obviously. The Walking Dead, and there are others too, off the top of my head right now. I don't have them. Lock and Key, there was that. What else is there? I don't have them right now, I forgot them. But there are other examples you can tell us in the comments. If you don't know a comic, obviously Transformers is a comic, Transformers is a comic. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles started as a comic and focuses on ninjas, not superheroes. And also, what is the comic like? Today, when you're a beginner, it's complicated. People ask me all the time, boss, I want to start reading comics but don't know where to begin. That's a question you never get with manga, never. If someone says, I'd like to start One Piece, where do I start? Volume 1, shut up. You prefer the anime? Episode 1, shut up. There you go, it's simple, it's straightforward. Each universe is well organized. And above all, the thing about manga compared to comics is that manga is really an author's work, whereas American comics, so there are some indie author works, of course, but it's mostly about licensed stuff. Frank Miller, even though he wrote some amazing Batman stories, he's not the one who created Batman. You see what I mean? If there are 36,000 different Batman's continuity, relaunches every 10 years, it's because they're exploiting the license. Batman, Superman, Spider-Man, X-Men and all that, so it becomes incomprehensible and as a result it inevitably becomes niche. Because to know everything about Spider-Man, to know everything about Batman, you really have to be a super hardcore geek, a super hardcore nerd to know it all. Whereas with manga, you don't need to be a crazy otaku to get into it. You just pick up a manga, you read it, you enjoy it, or you don't, and that's it. You don't need, for example, to have read Naruto to understand One Piece. Whereas sometimes to really understand what's going on in Batman, you need to have read Superman and vice versa. I'm exaggerating, but it's kind of like that anyway. So it's not easy to get into comics, so it scares people. And also, especially the concept of superheroes. These are superheroes who are getting a bit old. It's hard to bring in new people, and when they do, it doesn't work. That's the paradox of comics. It doesn't work because they're not the heroes people want to see. The only new heroes who manage to break through a little are derivatives of existing heroes. Miles Morales, the Black Spider-Man, works because he's Spider-Man. If it had been something else, it wouldn't have worked. I'm not sure we'd still be talking about it today. If you see what I mean, that's the kind of example I'm talking about. Then there's another problem with United States comics. In recent years, these last 10, 15 years, they've been offering something that's no longer in tune with their audience at all. The United States comics audience, I'm going to be very stereotypical, but what is it really? Normally it's guys like me and even older than me uh, who are big nerds. Actually, the problem isn't the general audience, it's that they've tried to target them in recent years. An audience that doesn't match at all what the original comic book readers are looking for. I'll give you some examples. I'll give you examples that United States comic fans themselves posted on Twitter, actually, following the article about Jim Lee. So here, for example, this is a cover from a Superboy arc. So Superboy has a half Asian boyfriend with purple hair. Well, I want to say, why not? I have nothing against the existence of boys' love or things like that. I mean, why not? If you want to make comics with boys' love, why not? But why are you doing it with Superboy? That's the issue. Those interested in Superboy aren't actually coming to read Superboy or even Superman. To see that story, I haven't read it and don't care, so I can't say if it's good. But if people come to see Superboy, it's to see him do Superboy or Superman stuff. It's like, let's go fight Brainiac, let's go save the a planet, you know, it sounds dumb, but that's kind of what it is. You want to see Superman doing Superman stuff, but here, Superboy, you're telling me about his love story with a Japanese guy with purple hair. I don't care, actually, but even if you told a love story with a girl, it would have been the same. I don't care. That's why you did this. So, obviously it flopped. Some guys collect comics, so they buy every issue when issue number 1 comes out, hoping it'll be valuable. But after that, sales drop sharply. We don't care. That's not why we want it or what we want to see in a comic. Superboy. So, I think there's a disconnect between the current comic creators and the expectations of the audience. That's why you have Superboy with his boyfriend, or you have Marineford in One Piece. What are you going to read? You're going to read One Piece, obviously. But that's not the only example. There are other examples too recently, like Superboy, who joins a Justice League protesting for the climate. So it's obviously a topic we can talk about whatever you want, but do you see, can you imagine for a second the movie in the middle of a protest? The climate is changing, we don't care. Actually, that's not why we read a comic, that's not why we read a manga either. So there are probably some mangas that talk about that topic, but they make a specific series that talks about that subject. They're not going to quote unquote distort an existing series to talk about that. The Japanese will create their own series. And then if it sells, it sells. If it doesn't, it doesn't. You know what I mean? Honestly, I'm not surprised it doesn't sell. We don't care. You read Superboy, but it's about climate change? I want real Superboy stories, especially since you're Superboy. You can change the climate. You have mega powers, bastard, anyway. Another example. Here's a recent Batman example that sparked some discussion. Here's the latest crazy thing from the Batman verse. They're introducing, get this, the grandson of Ra's al Ghul, who is a trans person, so a trans woman, if I understood correctly. Again, why not? It's a topic that can exist, that definitely deserves to be told. But why would you put that in the Batman universe? Why should we care? Do you read Batman to read a story about Ra's al Ghul's grandson transitioning? Honestly, no. Why don't you make a separate comic to tell that story? Why do you have to bother us with this? In Batman, the audience wants Batman. They don't want to see that. They want to see Batman fighting the Joker, Scarecrow, Mr. Freeze, Ra's al Ghul. Why not? They don't want to see that. Why would they care about it? You know what I mean? So, actually, there's a problem with comics compared to manga. What manga understood is that manga creators make manga based on the audience they're targeting. Comics change comics to target audiences other than Batman's audience. You see what I mean? If they wanted to talk about a trans superhero character, why didn't they make a new comic, a new character with that kind of background? Why put it in Batman then? It's not the Batman comic strictly speaking, but it's something related to the Batman universe. Why are you doing this? I think it's a very bad strategy. The story is probably very good. But personally, I'm a fan of Batman and I'm not going to buy it. I don't care. It's not the kind of story I want to read in Batman. You see what I mean? Whereas in the comic JoJo Land, the latest arc of JoJo, there are two JoJos. There's one of the two JoJos. It's a woman, France, and nobody cares. The manga didn't promote that. It's simply part of the story and accepted by everyone. JoJo fans don't care. They just read it because it's still JoJo. They didn't change JoJo to add that. It's still fundamentally JoJo. You see what I mean? I think you got what I was saying, but it's not over. It's not over. Look, the problem with comics is that they do everything and anything, and especially anything. The all-new Venom. Let me show you. The all-new Venom. All-new Venom is Mary Jane Watson. That is Spider-Man's girlfriend who becomes Venom. It's not a sexy Venom. It's a tough Venom, but still Venom. So now you want to read that. Besides the guys, the collectors, the scalpers who are going to buy Volume 1, the first issue, to resell it for a fortune in 10 years, who's going to read this crap? Maybe it's really good, but I don't care. The basic idea is lame. Mary Jane Watson becomes Venom. Who's going to become Venom next? Aunt May? Then what? Is it J. Jonah Jameson who becomes Venom? Everyone becomes Venom? What's the story even about? No surprise you'd rather buy monster players? It makes sense, right? I mean, it makes sense. After a while, it makes sense, or it doesn't make sense, but I think it makes sense. Well, yeah, United States comics have a lot of problems, but be careful. I'm not saying that manga as a whole is perfect. There are some weird things in manga too, some manga that are a bit pedo and all that. Some are definitely a bit pedo, weird, strange, and some have kind of racist stuff too. There are some crazy things in manga, but if you're not crazy yourself, you can read manga your whole life without ever coming across something like that. You see what I mean? Here, if you read Venom, you have to deal with Venom and Mary Jane. I'm exaggerating, so you get my point. Some might say, no, you didn't do that, but it's just to illustrate. Whereas with manga, if you only want to read soccer manga, you can read only soccer manga your whole life. And that soccer manga will never turn into a karate manga. They're not going to change direction in the middle of the manga. That just doesn't happen like that. In any case, if you're reading a soccer manga, you'll be reading a soccer manga until the end. It's not going to turn into an isekai with mechas halfway through. No, it's a soccer manga. It's weird, but it's a soccer manga. You see what I mean? I mean, One Piece, it's not going to turn into a One Piece. It's not going to become a Western overnight. No, they're pirates. Well, weird pirates, but still pirates. Look, so the strength of manga in general and Japanese animation in general, it's its real diversity for a real diverse audience, not just a superficial diversity for an audience that in fact doesn't really exist. So I'm very curious to see how American comics will evolve based on that idea. Will it be an evolution of the format, an evolution in the way stories are told? There have been recent big successes in the United States like the Absolute Universe from Detective Comics, especially Absolute Batman, which is hugely popular. There, they decided to completely rewrite the story of Batman. Now, he's no longer a billionaire, he's a worker, he's poor. He starts from that principle. And actually, it's a whole new universe. So if you want to follow Absolute Batman, you just have to read Absolute Batman. You don't need to have 75 or 80 years of background to understand what's happening in Batman. You just read Volume 1 of Absolute Batman and it works. It's amazing. Same for Wonder Woman, same for the new Superman they made. Maybe we should go that direction and stop relaunching every 10 years with Volume 0. There you go, maybe that's it. Maybe it's a bold move to change the format a bit to adapt more to the times. That's it. Those were my thoughts on the subject because I'm a big fan of comics too, of course. I'll leave you now. Let me know what you think in the comments. And I'll see you very soon on SPATULE Bros for new videos. Let your passion guide you, yes.